Hi, it's Ruth Pierce, and I like to help you maximize your relationships, whether they be personal, professional, whether they be with people, with organizations. Let's take them to the next level. And we've been going through The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. We're in the 5th habit. This is our first time in this one. So we're going to be talking about seek to understand, then be understood. Now, let's review right quick, though, before we dive into this one. There's the private victories, and habit 1 is be proactive. This is where you get the internal view where it needs to be. Realize that you're in charge of your life. Don't let other people tell you what your life should look like. Habit 2 is begin with the end in mind. It's the chapter that starts with your funeral, and you listen to what people say about you. So you decide where you want your life to end up, what type of character you want to have. And I think that's the main one. Not that you achieve a lot of things as much as what type of character do you want to develop. And then the third one is put first things first. Now, where you know where you want to be, then what do you need to prioritize in your life? Those are the private victories. And then the second part of the book is the public victories. And that's habit 4, 5, and 6. Habit 4 is think win-win. You don't want win-lose. You don't want lose-win. And there's several others there, which is win only, lose-lose, win-win or no deal. But the more important the relationship is to you, the more important you want win-win to happen. And then we're on habit 5, which is seek to understand, then to be understood. And in this chapter, he talks about a trip to the optometrist because you, the reader, are complaining about you aren't being able to see. The optometrist hands you his glasses, and he says, here, try these on. See how they work. So you put them on, and you can't see at all. You can't see with somebody else's glasses very well, can we? But he gets real frustrated with you, and he says, try harder. Think positively. They're going to work for you because they've worked for me for decades. How dumb is that? But how many times have we had people tell us, try harder, think positive? How many times have we used that phrase? Sometimes it works, but not often, does it? It just makes us get frustrated. But do you have confidence in someone who does not diagnose before he prescribes? But how often do we truly diagnose what the problem is before we prescribe in our communication? We have a tendency to rush in to fix things with good advice. We often fail to take the time to diagnose, to really deeply understand the problem first. The key to effective communication is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Communication is the most important skill in life. Reading, writing, speaking, and listening are the 4 basic types of communication. All are absolutely critical to your effectiveness. And you spend many years learning to read, write, and speak. But how much training have you actually had in listening? What training have you had that enables you to listen so that you really deeply understand another human being from that person's own frame of reference? No. this next statement. It talks about how I will feel. And this is in the book. It wasn't for me personally. But if you want to interact effectively with me, to influence, you first need to understand me. That's a true statement, isn't it? And you cannot do that with technique alone. Goes back to that personality, ethics versus character. If I sense you are using some technique, I will sense manipulation or not authentic. I wonder what your motives are, and I do not feel safe to open up to you. The real key to your influence with me is your example, your actual conduct. It flows naturally out of your character or the kind of person you truly are, that private victory. Not what others say you are or what you may want me to think you are. It is evident in how I actually experience you. Your true beliefs will naturally come forth in your conduct. Your character is constantly radiating, communicating. In the long run, I come to instinctively trust or distrust you and your efforts with me. And if I get a mixed message, it's very hard for me to open up with you. Even if I want or even need your love and influence, I don't feel safe enough to expose my opinions, experiences, and my tender feelings. But if I don't open up to you, how will you know how to advise or counsel me? You may say you care and appreciate me. I desperately want to believe that, but how can you appreciate me when you don't even understand me? All I have are your words, and I can't trust words. Unless you've influenced me by my uniqueness, unless you're influenced by my uniqueness, I'm not going to be influenced by your advice. You have to build the skill of empathic listening on a base of character that inspires openness and trust. You have to build the emotional bank account that creates a commerce between hearts. Or in another place, he says soul to soul. What is empathic listening? Let's go into that. In normal communication, we typically seek first to be understood. Most people listen not with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. They are either speaking or preparing to speak. They are filtering everything through their own paradigms, reading their autobiography into other people's lives. Seek to understand involves a very deep shift in the paradigm. Which reminds me, way back to the introduction in the book, remember this thing with the bus, the city bus, and Stephen Covey was on the bus, and a dad and some rowdy kids got on, and the kids kept being loud and obnoxious and bothering the other people on the bus. The dad happened to be sitting by Stephen Covey. Finally, he spoke up, and he says, "Do you think you could get your kids to settle down," or something along that line? And it's like the dad kind of just woke up out of trance, and he says, "Yeah, we just got back from the hospital where their mom just died. And I don't think they know how to act right now, how to handle it." And that changed Stephen Covey's paradigm. And that's how he introduced paradigm to us. And that was a major shift for Stephen Covey because he understood better about the kids' behavior. In this case, he's asking us to shift our paradigm from being understood first to understanding the other person first. Your time will come later. When we project our experiences on others, we are prescribing our glasses for everyone else. Now, we could see that story with the optometrist. We can't see it as clearly with the communication, but it's still there. Then there was a story about the father that said, I don't understand my kid. He just won't listen to me. He wasn't listening to the kid to hear his paradigm, was he? When another person speaks, we usually listen at one of four levels. Ignoring them, not really listening at all. We're all guilty of that, aren't we? Pretending to listen. Yeah, right. Selective listening, hearing only certain parts of the conversation that we want to hear. Attentive listening, paying attention and focusing on the words being said. But the fifth level is empathic listening, and it's the highest form of listening. It is not the technique of active or reflective listening, mimicking what another person says. That kind of listening is skill-based, truncated from character and relationships, and often insults those listened to in such a way. It's autobiographical. That's your motive in listening. You are listening with reflective skills, but you are listening with the intent to reply, control, or manipulate. True empathic listening is listening with the intent to understand. Seeking first to understand, to really understand. Empathic, from empathy, listens to get inside another's frame of reference. You look out through it. You see the world the way they see the world. You understand their paradigm. You understand how they feel. And this next one is real important, I believe. Empathy is not sympathy. Sympathy is a form of agreement, a form of judgment. Sometimes it is the most appropriate emotion and response. But people often feed on sympathy. It makes them dependent. The essence of empathic listening is not that you agree with someone, it's that you fully, deeply understand that person, emotionally as well as intellectually. Empathic listening involves much more than registering, reflecting, or even understanding the words that are said. We all know that part, that 10% is words, 30% is sounds, and 60% is body language. In empathic listening, you listen with your ears, but more importantly, with your eyes and your heart. You listen for feeling, for meaning. You listen for behavior. You use your right brain as well as your left. You sense, you intuit, and you feel. It is powerful because it gives you accurate data to work with. Instead of projecting your own autobiography and assuming thoughts, feelings, motive, and interpretation, you are dealing with the reality inside another person's head and heart. Since you are listening to understand, you are focused on receiving the deep communication of another human soul. It is the key to making deposits in the emotional bank account. Empathic listening is deeply therapeutic and healing because it gives a person psychological air. This psychological air is so important. In fact, it was my aha point as I went through this chapter this time. If all the air was sucked out of the room, you would go into survival mode. Nothing else would matter until you got air. But if you have air to breathe, you take it for granted and it doesn't motivate you. Satisfied needs do not motivate. It's only unsatisfied needs that motivate us. Next to physical survival, the greatest need of a human being is psychological survival, to be understood, to be affirmed, to be evaluated, to be appreciated. And by the way, if any of you listen to this need permission to know that you're important, that you are appreciated, you're validated, I give you that permission to do that. I give you permission to love yourself, like the book says, like your life depends on it. And to love yourself in a healthy way. This isn't being selfish, because as you learn to love yourself in that healthy way, it will overflow organically and naturally to other people. When you listen with empathy, you give that person psychological air. After that vital need is met, then you can focus on influencing and problem solving. And often they will come up with their own problem solving, by the way. Seeking first to understand, diagnosing before you prescribe is hard. It's so much easier in the short run to hand someone a pair of glasses that fit you so well these many years. But in the long run, it severely depletes both P, the product, and PC, the producing capacity. That goes back to the goose that produced the golden eggs. The golden eggs were the product. The goose was the PC, the producing capacity. And once he killed the goose, there were no more golden eggs. Now, PC can be equipment and it can be relationships. And in this case, we would be focusing more on the relationships. You don't want to destroy the relationship to get the end result, because then you won't have the relationship. You cannot achieve maximum interdependent relationships from an inaccurate understanding of where other people are coming from. You cannot have high emotional bank accounts if the person you relate with don't feel understood. That's true about them. It's also true with you. Empathic listening is risky. It takes a great deal of security, that private victory, to go into a deep listening experience, because you open yourself up to be influenced. You become vulnerable. It's a paradox, because in order to have influence, you have to be influenced. That means you have to really understand. And that's why those private victories, habit 1, 2, and 3, are so foundational. They give you that changeless inner core, the principle center from which you can handle the more outward vulnerability with peace and strength. Seek to understand before you prescribe is a correct principle. You do not have confidence in a doctor's prescription unless you have confidence in his diagnosis. There was an interesting story there about when their newborn daughter was sick and they called the doctor. He didn't realize it was a newborn, so he gave the wrong prescription. But they did get it corrected. And this is true in all areas of our life, whether it's personal or professional. And with that, we're going to stop for today, and we'll continue with habit 5 next